Hello, this is Dr. Gabi Gross. Today we want to talk about root causes for equine gastric ulcers. And this presentation is not intended to represent or replace veterinary diagnostics or treatment. It is merely for your educational purposes. There are currently two types of gastrointestinal ulcers in horses. Today, we want to talk about gastric ulcers, meaning they are in the stomach of the horse. Millions are spent each year on ulcer medication. We know the money is in the medicine, but it does not cure the cause. It is a merely symptomatic treatment. What are the causes for stomach ulcers in horses? Commonly, we all agree that it is stress, but how do we manage stress in our horses effectively and therefore avoid stomach ulcers? And how does stress actually produce stomach ulcers? You need to look at evolution. The species horse has existed over 50 to 60 million years. And if you go back 50 million years ago, the horse was the size of a fox, and it did not have the elongated body that we know from our horses today. And why is that? Because the digestive tract, as we know it from our horse today, that produced this elongated body, did not exist in this little animal that was living in the forest. It ate leaves, nuts, fruits, and could not digest pasture grass or any types of long chain fiber. If you look at when the horse started to be domesticated, it is 5,000 years ago. It has only been 5,000 years, and I could not make this dot small enough to create an equivalent comparison here. What I'm trying to demonstrate is that evolution has not had a chance yet to adapt the internal design of the horse that has been the same for about 33 million years to domestication. The horse we know today is still the same interior design that it was 33 million years ago when the hindgut, when the additional fermentation chamber was installed. At the same time, the horse of today still thinks that the T-Rex could come around and kill them, or the saber-toothed tiger. The horse's brain has not adjusted to feel safe in the hands of humans, not because it won't trust, but in the brain, the reflexes, the flight mechanisms are still active as if there were millions of years ago. I like to browse antique stores and secondhand stores. And on one of my trips, I came across this book, Evolution of the Horse's Brain. It was published in 1948. It's an old edition, but if you consider the horse's brain has not changed for 33 million years, this is an actual edition. You can find information in here, but let me tell you that the horse's brain is millions and millions and millions of years old, and no matter how often we tell our horses to trust us, the reflexes are still there. We have to manage that brain-body mechanism. Stress gets perceived in the horse's brain. So it's important to manage triggers here effectively. What's commonly done is that we give the horse ulcer medication, which will inhibit stomach acid because it is commonly believed that stress increases stomach acid production. This is actually not quite true this way. And you will see this in this presentation, what actually happens. And it's also not quite true that stomach acid per se leads to stomach ulcers, to increases the incidence. And how so? First of all, let's talk about the biological importance and nutritional importance of hydrochloric acid, also called stomach acid. In the body, especially in the digestive tract, everything happens in a chronological order, and one chemical trigger initiates the next reaction. Stomach acid is essential to absorb food, supplements, and medication. In the absence of stomach acid, this cannot happen, and your horse will lose weight, feel miserable, and be just plainly malnourished. The second thing stomach acid does is it will disinfect the bacteria and viruses that are contained in the food. So if your horse doesn't have any stomach acid, it will be more susceptible to infections entering the gastrointestinal tract and also be able to be absorbed from there into the whole body. Stomach acid mixes with food in the stomach and then gets transported into the gut. To signal to the liver and pancreas to release bile and digestive juices, the food has to be of a low pH. That means it has to be acidic. This is the chemical trigger, the chemical command to pancreas and liver to release digestive juices. If there's no stomach acid, the mixed food that comes from the stomach will not be able to trigger the release of those digestive juices, and that in turn again produces maldigestion. And then this food gets not only not absorbed, but it also then gets transported into this huge fermentation chamber in the horse called the hindgut. And in the hindgut, I call the hindgut a secret temple. The temple has a certain atmosphere. It has a certain biotope because the microorganisms that live there and that digest and dissect the celluloses from grass hay and long chain fiber, they need a certain biotope. They need a certain amount of pH. They need a certain amount of acidity. They need a certain amount of oxygen. And if this food material that is supposed to be absorbed in this foregut enters this fermentation chamber, everything goes upside down, and we call this dysbiosis. It's an imbalance, and this imbalance will lead to those probiotics or microorganisms to die off, and the bad ones move in, and you have a hindgut problem. Back to the stomach. What is normal? Under a normal circulated stomach, microulcers are actually common and daily. The stomach liner gets completely restructured and rebuilt, every single cell, within 7 to 10 days. As long as circulation assures the transport of building blocks and nutrients needed to restore those liners. And the point is this: the stomach acid in itself, it's just a liquid. It does not have innate intelligence. It does not know the difference between stomach content and stomach liner. So therefore, the liner will also be digested when the stomach acid gets released. But if there's balance between reconstruction and destruction, there will be only microulcers and no clinically visible holes in the stomach liner. Here's an example. On the scale, there's going to be a balance between destruction by the acid digestion and reconstruction of the stomach liner by appropriate circulation. Stress reduces circulation to the stomach, and then those microulcers cannot be patched up. So therefore, clinical ulcers are created, clinical ulcers which create clinical problems and make your horse appear like having a stomach ulcer, as in being cinchy, being reluctant to be trained, and all these things. So those ulcers in the stomach are created by the imbalance of much larger destruction and lack of circulation and lack of rebuilding. The question now is, logically, what changes circulation to the stomach? There are two neurological systems in the body of a mammal, whether humans or horses. Horses are flight animals, so their sympathetic mode kicks in much faster to assure that they can survive. A stressed horse will be in flight or fight mode. This is called the sympathetic mode. In the sympathetic mode, blood flow focuses on the systems that can save the horse's life and make it run away. So the blood flow goes to the muscles and central core organs to keep the horse alive and running. The stomach will then be restricted from circulation. The blood vessels to the stomach are constricted when the blood flow gets redirected to the core organs, such as heart, kidney, and muscles. And the stomach will not be able, in the sympathetic mode, to heal and to restructure the stomach liner. Now, the sympathetic mode is supposed to only last for a short amount of time. But if your horse is stressed in the stall, it might be permanently in sympathetic mode, and the stomach liner might never get the right blood supply to be restored. On the other side here on the right, we have the depiction of a relaxed horse in parasympathetic mode. The blood vessels open to the stomach. Therefore, the building blocks for repair can be brought to the stomach liner. Hence, there are no clinical effective ulcers. The micro ulcers are repaired right away. To give you an example, maybe your parents used to tell you after you ate in the summer not to jump into the pool because they said you might get a cramp, because you are in digestive mode, you are in parasympathetic mode, and the blood flow in that moment goes to your stomach, and it's not redirected to the muscles. Therefore, your muscles experience lack of oxygen if you engage them, and they have lactic acid production from the anaerobic metabolism, so you get a muscle cramp. Here's another illustration which nerve regulates the circulation to the stomach. It's the vagus nerve, and there's a left part and right branch that goes to the stomach. On the other hand, you want your horse in sympathetic mode when your horse is exercising to guarantee the blood flow to the stomach, and also, of course, when your horse is in a flight response. The question is now, how can we effectively, preventatively manage stress in our horses? I want to tackle a few elements on nutrition, on mental measures, and social means. First of all, as a nutritionist, I cannot emphasize nutritional stress reduction enough. Common myths in horse nutrition work often against anti-stress feeding. To keep your horse happy, you have to supply all the building blocks to your horse's body. And one building block that is often missing is bioavailable protein. A common source for protein is alfalfa, and alfalfa has about 17 of the 21 essential amino acids. There are still 4 missing. They're called branched chain amino acids. Let me give you one example. Glutamine, for instance, contained in soybean meal here on the left, is very important to heal the stomach liner. You can now buy glutamine as separately, but you might as well feed your horse soybean meal. Now let go about the myths on soybeans. There are 2 components to soybeans. There's soybean meal, this is where the protein is, and then there's soybean oil. Hormones, estrogenic hormones, are lipophilic. Hormones go into the oily component of the plant in the bean. So the soybean meal does not have those estrogenic components. We might argue about GMO, but when you have to make a decision whether to offer your horse in our culture enough protein, or whether to possibly give your horse some GMO created components, I would always go for supplying my horse the complete nutrition. Our world is like you're trying to fit a square into a round hole, right? One edge always sticks out. You cannot make it perfect. Just settle for excellence. And in my consultation practice, my horse owners are very happy with what they get. There are locally deficient minerals or imbalanced minerals in your soil, and I recommend to everybody to have your soil tested, the pH tested, and balance your soil pH so all the minerals that are in the soil can go into your grass or into the hay. If you really want to know, you can do a hair analysis to see what minerals are present in your horse's hair. I'll give you an example here in a moment. First, let's talk about digestive stress reduction. Often there's confusion between probiotics. These are the microorganisms in the fermentation chamber in the hindgut of the horse that digest the cellulose elements in fiber, grass, and hay. But the foregut needs enzymes. Enzymes are anything that ends in ase, protease for protein digestion, lipase for fat digestion, amylase for starch digestion. And proteins are, enzymes are protein structures within themselves. And when grass gets dried, the enzymes die off. Anything that gets pelleted or processed, the enzymes are denaturalized. They are dead, they're inactive. The horse, though, remember the horse is 33 million years old in its interior design. The horse does not have a specific enzyme gland that produces enough of the digestive enzymes needed for the nutrition in domestication. Therefore, you have to add a full spectrum of digestive enzymes to the feed bucket so your horse can absorb in the foregut all the elements that needed for performance without them entering the hindgut and producing dysbiosis. Here is an example of a hair analysis chart. You see the minerals on the bottom. One very common finding is iron overload, which happens when the hay or grass is grown on acidic soil. And iron overload has been correlated with endocrine disturbances in horses. And on the other hand, iron and copper are antagonists. And when the iron is high, the copper is kept out. Copper, in turn, is responsible for collagen and connective tissue, as in joints, tendons, ligaments, hoofs. You need the right amount of copper in your horse to avoid issues, health issues in tendons, ligaments, and joints, and also hoofs. Copper deficient horses often look like bleached, and there's a common myth that a horse bleaches from the sun. That's actually not true. It's a copper deficiency commonly. Here's an example. The horse, these photos were taken about 12 years ago. The horse is still alive and well against all odds from the time, from the veterinary diagnosis, were pretty much all endocrine diseases in one horse together. And the minerals do not show well in the bloodstream. You have to take a hair analysis. When we compared the hair analysis to the blood analysis, you could see the differences. And in the hair, this horse showed an extreme copper deficiency along with other mineral deficiencies that produced this diseased body. You can see how fast horses can change. This is the same horse on the left side, all bleached, so to say. On the right, you see the dapples even. And also you can see, if you look closely, the horse has started to build muscle and lean up, right? Mental stress management. We're coming to this. This is my previous stallion here who loved to fetch the ball. And mental relaxation can be introduced with natural ingredients. I recommend magnesium chelated at the clinical effective amounts, which depends on breed and weight and use of your horse. I recommend to combine this with clinically effective amounts of vitamin B1. There are different versions of thiamine. Use the one that doesn't clump. And then before riding, I usually recommend to give your horse a stomach acid buffer, which is alfalfa, high in calcium, or Tums, if your horse likes to eat them. And there's other supplements that provide magnesium and calcium as stomach acid buffers. So this means that as soon as this ingredient comes into the stomach, it will neutralize the pH. It will disengage the stomach acid. And for the duration of your ride of about an hour and a half, these ingredients work. And then when your horse comes back into the stall, the stomach acid starts producing again. So they don't work all day, and you don't want them to work all day. You want them to work for the duration of your ride. Social relaxation, one very important point is desensitization. Some horsemanship trainers have audio and visual desensitization tracks. And you can, of course, get your horse a goat or a miniature donkey or a pony, or even a stall mirror. Plastic mirrors are available, and they help often to make the horse believe or feel that they're not alone. Classical music, some horses like that. So last but not least, this always comes up in the Q&A in my seminars, a few comments on what we call H+ proton pump blockers. These are stomach ulcer medications. The ingredient to that is omeprazole. I want to talk about my experience in timing and use of omeprazole. Again, this is not prescribing. Ask your veterinarian if in doubt, and you will get the veterinarian's opinion. Here is my scientific research findings and fact sharing. Here's a horse that had been given ulcer medications every day in the morning for months. You can see this horse doesn't look very healthy. It has lost top line and muscle. You can see the ribs, and it was fed very well, but it didn't appear to absorb the nutrition. If you remember the earlier slide, the absence of stomach acid will produce the inability for the horse to absorb the nutrition and make use of it. And here's something sad. Chronic use can actually lead to spontaneous stomach ruptures. Why is that? Because the stomach muscle is a muscle that needs training. It needs to contract to stay strong. And the stomach muscle contracts on a chemical trigger on the presence of stomach acid. And if there's never any stomach acid present, the muscle will fatigue and atrophy, and over time will not have the strength to contract and transport the stomach content into the foregut. And this means that the stomach overloads, and it can produce spontaneous stomach ruptures. In horses, often those horses don't show a lot of pain, and all of a sudden, when you find what's going on, it's too late. Here's the digestive process, what happens. There is chemical digestion of proteins happening in the stomach in preparation for absorption with the hydrochloric acid and an enzyme called pepsin, and they mix into a gastric juice. And these juices initiate muscular contraction as peristalsis in the intent for mechanical digestion. And if you block the hydrochloric acid all the time, you will not have appropriate muscular contractions. Why do we call these medications H+ proton pump blocker? Because the acid pump that is in the stomach wall and that releases stomach acid is called H+ proton pump by the mechanism it works. We're not going to go into further detail here, it's not needed. But here's a graph that is eye-opening. And what I want to show you here is that the general recommendation, the manufacturer's recommendation to give the omeprazole in the morning before on an empty stomach makes pharmaceutically no sense to me. And why is that? This is an absorption study. What they did here is they gave omeprazole at hour 0, and then every so often here indicated by those little symbols, they took serum tests from the horse. They took the blood and measured the concentration of the omeprazole in the serum. And you can see here that for the first good 2 to 3 hours, nothing happens. There's no omeprazole in the serum. And what that means is, remember, the blood supply will bring the omeprazole from the outside to the H+ proton pump and block it there. So it has to go up in the bloodstream first, so the blood can then circulate by the stomach and deliver the medication to block the stomach acid. And here, after in this graph, now there's studies that it happens a little bit earlier, but it's around at least about an hour, nothing happens. So if you give this medication first thing in the morning, and then you think the stomach acid is neutralized while you're riding your horse, it's actually not true. It doesn't work yet. And then you bring your horse back into the stall to feed it. And now the omeprazole concentration goes up. And as you're feeding your horse, as this goes up, the stomach acid goes down. And it stays down. Stomach acid stays down as this medication works for another, at least, the graph ends here, but for another 8 to 10 hours, there's no stomach acid present. So as you're feeding your horse several times throughout the day, all what you're feeding here, except the grass hay fiber, will not be able to be absorbed, whether it's supplements, medication, whatever, fat as in rice bran, protein as in a ration balancer, anything that is not cellulose will not be able to enter the body, and it will also then proceed and transported towards the end to the hindgut, and it will enter the secret sacred fermentation chamber in which the probiotics can only deal with water and oxygen and cellulose, and it will impact their hindgut biotope and their hindgut climate and produce a dysbiosis. So what do? If you do have to give omeprazole and your vet prescribes it, I would like to engage a conversation with your veterinarian. And here's what I've been told by my colleagues. If the industry requires that the medication gets given in the morning, the veterinarian has to do, by state of the art, follow the instructions on the label. Raise the question, raise the discussion, why cannot I give omeprazole to my horse after with a dinner bucket? Then it can work overnight without blocking daytime nutrition on an empty stomach as well. Stomach passage is usually only 20 minutes or half an hour. So then at night you can give your horse grass hay, because the grass hay and fiber, which that gets digested in the hindgut, is not affected by stomach acid, but everything else, alfalfa, will be affected. So make sure that all these nutrients that are supposed to be foregut absorbed are given before you give the omeprazole. So the take-home message here is that stress in horses is perceived different from stress in people. We are predators as humans, and horses are flight animals, and their brain is millions and millions of years old, and they still perceive the saber-toothed tiger possibility coming around the corner and killing them. Horses and humans need stomach acid to absorb the nutrition. Gastric ulcers occur from lack of circulation, which is produced by stress that switches the neurological mechanisms to sympathetic mode and reduces circulation to the stomach. You can de-stress your horse with the right nutrition, correct supplementation and mineral balancing according to your area, and things that relax and entertain your horse: stall body, mirrors, music, turnout if possible, and social interaction with other horses. If you need my help, you can contact me at 425-465-0407 or leave a comment here. Thank you.